Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we are revisiting the 5-color saga archetype thanks to the additions from Final Fantasy, and our commander is Tom Bombadil, a 5-mana 4/4 with hexproof and indestructible as long as we have 4 or more lore counters among sagas we control. And then once each turn, when the final chapter of a saga is reached, we get to randomly reveal cards from the top of our deck until we hit a saga enchantment, and then we get to put it onto the battlefield for free. So very fun ability, especially if you get lucky and randomly put something very expensive into play without having to pay for it. So then taking a look at our deck breakdown, we're going to need a little bit of mana fixing and mana acceleration to get our commander online, but then the bulk of the deck are the sagas to set up our commander in the first place. Then we've got some additional enchantment synergies, lots of enchantress type cards that will draw a card when an enchantment enters the battlefield. We've got a few ways to mess with lore counters, either adding or removing them, so we can ideally time them so we can play Tom and then immediately get a saga to the final chapter to find another saga to replace it, and then the miscellaneous section has a bit more interaction as well. So now for the deep dive, starting with our mana accelerants. Chromox is perfect in a 5-color deck, fixing our colors and speeding things up. We've got Birds of Paradise and Delighted Halfling as mana creatures, can also make Tom uncounterable, and Utopia Sprawl, an enchantment, doesn't need to enchant a forest, but we have a lot of fetch lands to make sure we can find them, and then it's also a way to maybe trigger some of our other cards. Then Azusa's Many Journeys is more of a ramp card than a saga to set up Tom, because if we played on turn 2, we're unlikely to play Tom before we reach the final chapter. And then there's a Bloom Tender, excellent once we have Tom in play, as it can tap for 5 colors. And then we've got some sorceries here with Explore, playing an extra land. Farseek is excellent, as it can even get our non-basic lands, and a Rampant Growth. Sanctum Weaver, with plenty of enchantments, can also make a lot of mana. The Naturalist discounts all our enchantments by 1. There's Arcane Signet. Cultivate to get some of our basics, Dryad to play additional lands out, Faber Elder, a bigger version of the Bloom Tender, and then Buried in the Garden is both removal as well as a way to produce additional mana. Then we get to our sagas. At 2 mana, there's the Witch's Vanity, which we can play as removal. We've got the Restoration, which can find our basic planes to help us ramp. Scroll of Isildur, a way to steal an opposing artifact and eventually tap some things down. We've got Elspeth's Nightmare, which can also be quite effective, first taking out a smaller creature, then a Duress effect, and then can clear the opponent's graveyard. Fable's also very good if we can play it early, with a Shaman making extra treasure tokens, improving our hand. And Jugon Defends the Temple helps us ramp with a Human Monk token on Chapter 1, and then can also eventually turn into a nice mana sink, giving us additional +1 counters. Summon Fenrir is excellent if we can play Tom on the following turn, give it an extra +1 counter, likely draw a card, and then trigger Tom's ability once we get to the final chapter. Weatherseed Treaty, very similar, gets to find an extra land, makes a token, can pump something up. Terra can eventually transform into Esper Terra if we pay 6 mana for it, and can also just find additional enchantments when it enters a battlefield. Awaken the Honored Dead gives us some interaction on Chapter 1, can fill the graveyard, and then we can maybe get something back. The Bath Song has additional card advantage. A Crone War can steal an opposing creature and maybe take some of them out if they end up being tapped. Elder Dragon War gives us a sweeper, dealing 2 to each creature. We've got Binding as another powerful removal spell that also helps us ramp. The Revival makes a bunch of tokens, we get to pump them up and then give creatures trample and lifelink until end of turn. And then at 5 mana, we've got Elspeth Conquers Death, also a way to maybe get back our commander from the graveyard if we don't send it to the command zone. Eldest Reborn can also be very effective if our opponent only has 1 creature or planeswalker on the battlefield. Cruelty of Gix can be pretty effective, as we get to disrupt the opponent's hands, then tutor something up at the cost of 3 life, and then we can even reanimate a creature from a graveyard. And it also has a read ahead mechanic, similar to the Elder Dragon War, so if we have Tom in play and we read ahead, we can immediately go to Chapter 3 if we'd like, triggering Tom's ability if we haven't already. Then, speaking of dragons, we have There and Back Again, which will first prevent something from blocking, then gets to search up a mountain, and then makes Smaug a 6/6 Flying Haste dragon token, which will leave 14 treasure tokens behind if it dies. Summon Titan from Final Fantasy will mill 5, and then we get to return all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped, also quite synergistic with all the fetch lands we have. Then summon Primal Odin, can destroy a creature, and if it can connect on Chapter 2, can also lose the opponent the game. got Waking the Trolls to destroy lands and get them back from the graveyard to help us ramp, making an army of Troll Warrior tokens. The Kami War can also be back-breaking, exiling target non-land permanent, and then providing more value. If we ever get to attack with a transformed version, it's pretty much game over. Kiora Best Sea God, another incredibly powerful saga, making an 8/8 token with hexproof, tapping opposing things down and then stealing the opponent's best permanent. We've got Summon Knights of Round, as well as Summon Bahamut from Final Fantasy, both excellent, especially if we can randomly find them with Tom. Then we've got more enchantment payoffs with Destiny Spinner, making enchantments and creatures we control uncounterable, and also has a mana sink. If we have some enchantments in play, can turn a land into a large creature. We've got Nessian Wanderer, finding additional lands with Constellation, especially synergistic if we have a Dryad on the battlefield to immediately play additional lands out. Then Weaver of Harmony pumps up our enchantment creatures and can also copy an activated or triggered ability from an enchantment source, so we can maybe trigger our sagas an additional time, or maybe draw an extra card from some of our other enchantments. Sterling Grove gives other enchantments we control Shroud, so that's an old school keyword, similar to Hexproof, but we also cannot target our own creatures or enchantments that have Shroud, so it can sometimes come up, but we can also use it as a tutor effect to search an enchantment and put it on the top of our deck. There's Sithis as one of the best Enchantress cards, 1/2, drawing a card and gaining a life whenever an enchantment is cast, so even if it gets countered, it will still provide value, similar to Enchantress's Presence. And then a Citizen Champion has Constellation, so the enchantment needs to enter the battlefield, so if it gets countered, we don't get to draw a card and put a +1 counter on it. And Eidolon of Blossoms, an enchantment itself, also with Constellation, drawing a card. Then there's Calyx with Constellation giving us additional +1 counters, and if Calyx or an enchanted creature we control connects, we get to copy an enchantment we control, can also be very fun. And Yuna, another great addition from Final Fantasy, can reanimate enchantments at the end of our turn, while also giving them Ward 2, Trample, and Lifelink. And then we've got a few ways to mess with our lore counters. Clash can both add and remove a lore counter to re-trigger the same chapter, and can also help us fight opposing creatures. Goldberry, of course, very thematic alongside Tom, can also move lore counters around, maybe draw additional cards. Garnet, if it attacks, can remove a lore counter from any number of sagas we control, putting additional +1 counters on the 2/2 lifelinker. And Satsuki can tap, putting a lore counter on each saga we control, and if it dies, can also return a saga from our graveyard back to our hand. And then finally there's Swords to Plowshares, needs some efficient removal in our 5-color deck, and Leyline Binding can also be cast for 1 mana usually, thanks to Domain. And then Starfield of Nyx, another way to return enchantments from our graveyard to the battlefield each turn. And then the mana base has one of each basic, all the shock lands, most of the check lands, and a couple Verge lands as well. And then the tri lands, I'm going with all the green ones to make sure we have green early to get our mana fixing online. And then the fetch lands, being able to get both shock lands and tri lands is useful. Only had room for the one Surveil land in green-white, since green and white are the primary colors in the deck after all. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tatsunari, so a Sultai enchantment deck. So 2 enchantment decks going at it. This hand's missing a Forest for Utopia Sprawl, so it's pretty sketchy, a little slow. Yeah, with a green source off the top, this hand's actually pretty great. But I don't think I can risk it. This seems a bit more balanced. And there's Utopia Sprawl once again. So I guess I can play Verdant, get a Forest, play Birds, and then next turn I can use the Birds to maybe play the Utopia Sprawl on the Forest and then immediately tap it for 2 mana. So then if we name whites, for instance, I can play Satsuki and still a tapped Garden. And then we have every color without relying on the birds in case it gets removed. Opponent with Chrome Mox into Rampant Growth, so they're also off to a quick start. And Bojuka Bog, exile my graveyard. Yeah, I think that's fine. Could also just Rampant Growth now. So I don't need to name whites. Might want red, so we have double red. or black to have double black. That's another common color pair that we might need. Let's go with red, and then just get a swamp with rampant growth. Play tapped garden. And then next turn I should be able to double spell Satsuki and Revival. Calyx is tempting too. Cannot quite play it alongside Revival. And I would like to get Revival going to set up Tom, so we get to Chapter 3. So yeah, maybe this turn is just Revival alongside Satsuki. And then what I could do next turn is play Tom, and then immediately activate Satsuki to get to Chapter 3. Grave Pact is pretty scary. Opponent's got double blue left, so they could also have a counterspell. And now their 3/3 cannot be blocked. Okay. So distribute 3 counters. Just target all the tokens, I think. And then, yeah, play Tom. Activate Satsuki. And see what we can find. Summon Fenrir. Get another land. Might end up cycling the Triome. Opponent sadly imprisons Tom. Do have a few ways to remove enchantments, to maybe free it once again. And I guess now I can cycle the Triome. So, could triple block Kami, although opponent's somewhat likely to generate another one soon. So I'll just take it. Okay. So now we could try Calyx. And then Weaver. Take it from there. So if Satsuki dies, I do get to return the Revival to hand at least. It does kind of seem like they might have a counterspell up. And then Calyx can maybe grow one of these tokens. Opponent takes it, since they don't want Satsuki to get sacrificed as well. And sure, I'll keep Stomping Ground in hand. Keep up appearances. Still attacking. Opponent reconsiders. And the Bastion is next. Ooh, there I'm back again. So, Fenrir draws. Find Sithis, that's another good one. So we can play it. And then there I'm back again. Let me tap a little bit better. Counter on 2/2 token. And then I want to keep up Weaver of Harmony's ability, so we can draw an extra card with Sithis. So we can use the birds. Opponent negates my enchantment, but I still get to draw. And we can Farseek now. Or play Sterling Grove, get an extra Calyx trigger. And Sithis as well. Sterling Grove can also eventually tutor up an answer for the Imprisoned in the Moon to get Tom back. So we have a lot of options now. My enchantments now have Shroud, so cannot target my enchantment creatures with Calyx's ability. And get in there. And then our opponent's gonna trigger Grave Pact a bunch, presumably. Although we're okay if Satsuki dies. And get back a Saga. Can make it there and back again. Prevent something from blocking, eventually make a big flyer. Looks good. And then maybe the birds has served us well and can go now. So our opponent needs to top deck, since they're kind of on empty here. Sanctum Weaver, make another Toad. But yeah, next turn we can play there and back again, copy the trigger with Weaver of Harmony, so we can prevent both of the opponent's creatures from blocking, and then we should have a lethal attack here. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Jhoira, blue-reds, kind of historic, casting lots of cheap artifacts. Our hand's decent, we've got some cheap interaction with Leyline Binding. And can maybe start by getting a tri-land. Although if I play Portico and then get a tri-land, I can maybe play 1 mana Binding. Although never mind, because all my tri-lands are actually green, so I can't get the Grixis tri-land and then cast this for 1. So then, yeah, I guess there was no easy way to cast it for 1 on turn 2. But I could cast it for 2 mana if I play an untapped Steam Vents. Yeah, that seems fine. So if they tap out for Jhoira, I can exile it. Opponent respects interaction. I'm gonna tap out for Treaty now. And then the Saga can set up Tom next turn. To then get to Chapter 3 on the following turn. Wanna leave planes in the deck if possible. So we'll get a second blue for Kiora. Because we do have the Saga that specifically searches up a planes. So now they could play Jhoira, maybe with protection backup. Or just cast a bunch of cheap artifacts. Chromox could help. So we have options. I could just Buried in the Garden Jhoira. If they have a protection spell or a counter spell, I can still Binding for 1. Or I can go for Tom, and then Binding for 1 mana. Which I think I prefer, since that sets up Treaty to Chapter 3 next turn. So let's think about my mana. So play Tom, Chromox pitching Dryad. Makes green, so then green, black, blue, red, white, and then I guess I get another white source here with Arid Mesa after all. But yeah, I suppose I could Leyline Binding for starters, and then still reconsider with Buried in the Garden. If they have a wash away for Tom, it's not the end of the world. Opponent considers, so now the coast is clear. And then they most likely send Jhoira back to the command zone, where it will cost 6 mana. Okay. So far so good. I guess I don't have to get a basic plains, can just get a shock land. As long as it makes white. Might need double red. So can they answer Tom? Or do we get to reveal a free Saga? Semblance Anvil, likely pitching an artifact, so they get a 2 mana discount. And a key to the archive, but no interaction it seems. So opponent's in a good position to do something powerful next turn. And then doesn't matter too much what we pump. And we found the Kami War, that's brutal. And yeah, I think between Anvil and Key, probably go for Anvil. But our opponent scoops it up, can still bury it in the garden, or queue up as a sea god and take over from there. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Sephiroth, mono black sacrifice. Our hand can play turn 1 halfling, turn 2 either naturalist or maybe the treaty, and can even cast our author interaction. So yeah, despite only having 3 colors, I can cast all my spells. And then the halfling plus treaty can fix for Tom as well. Shambling Ghast is fine. So yeah, let's just immediately play treaty, get, wanna say, basic islands. Probably more relevant than mountain. Although it's close. Yeah, it's pretty equal, blue and red. Maybe I still prefer the red here. Now Infestation Sage, a more cheap sacrifice fodder. Alright, so I can play Naturalists, and then still defend the temple for 2 mana. Hit you for 1. Bone Shards takes care of the Naturalists, that's alright. And then with Shambling Ghast I get to take out my 1/1 as well. So pretty good play. Although I don't really mind getting rid of some of their removal, so maybe Tom gets to survive. And then, yeah, we'll target the Sapperling. Can maybe spread out the counters. Yeah, I guess now I can play Tom, so I maybe should take that opportunity, thanks to the halfling. Opponent had a bitter triumph in hand. So do they have a third removal spell for Tom? We'll find out. Otherwise, next turn we get to chapter 3, and Tom gets to find a replacement saga. Soul Shatter, sadly, is the answer. Alright. So yeah, as the dust settles, we're not too far from redeploying Tom. And then I can play Bloom Tender, put a bunch of counters on it. Still have swords to answer Sephiroth. It's going to be tricky for them to transform it right now. If we play the Vanity, Bloom Tender also makes an additional mana. So let's see. Yeah, I guess if I play the Vanity, can I then still play Tom? 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I guess I would be 1 mana short. So then maybe I do just replay Tom and call it a day. And then now Bloom Tender with Tom in play, of course, is also quite effective. Surveil, Stomping Ground, probably not a priority, even though if they remove Tom, I may need more mana. Alright, hopefully they can't remove Tom a second time. They do. Withering Torment also could have answered an enchantment, to be fair. Alright. Sephiroth sacks the token to draw. And the Destiny Spinner isn't bad either. So I can play Spinner, maybe put 3 counters on it, attack with a team, and keep up swords just in case. And then Destiny Spinner also has a decent mana sink. So our opponent's at 12. And then next turn we control 2 enchantments at the moment. Alright, Fatal Push the Spinner. Might be time to Swords Sephiroth before they get an extra trigger. They can recast it right now for 5, but that's their entire turn. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I could replay Tom. Although, don't have any sagas in play. Finding a saga with a read ahead mechanic would help, so we can immediately go to chapter 3. Our opponent may be looking to reanimate some stuff, going through graveyards. Could be a Breach the Multiverse for 7 mana, I suppose. Nope, just a Bitter Blossom. Pretty good alongside Sephiroth, but maybe a little slow at the moment. So I get to attack. No targets for Witch's Vanity, on the opponent's side at least. Opponent jumps. So it's possible they're holding a sweeper. Probably no real need to play the birds out. Alright, and that'll do it. So good old-fashioned beatdown. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Serah, Farron, so green-white legends. Hand seems fine. Don't think we need to keep up swords on turn 1, so we can just play tap Breeding Pool. Next turn, Farseek, get a tri-land. Hope they play an artifact we can target with a scroll. So I need to get red and black as well. So the Proving Ground. Could be decent to play Weaver first to maybe trigger our sagas an additional time. Sam gets back a fetch land, that's a neat interaction. Yeah, since we have the mana for it, although let me double check, because it is pretty green intensive. So yeah, next turn I can play Revival, but then I guess I don't have an extra green source to activate Weaver at the moment. So maybe I do just play Revival and then Tom next turn and hope to get to chapter 3. Opponent runs out their commander. So this might be a good window to swords, although now we can also use Scroll to steal the opponent's artifact once it transforms, or Leyline Binding. So I don't think that's a priority, and we can afford to play Tom. And yeah, hopefully it survives. Because then Revival gets to chapter 3, we get to find a replacement saga. Questing Beast is a good one. Especially for just 2 mana. And our opponents got their own swords, unfortunately. So, don't get to keep Tom in play. And our opponent gets to transform their commander, take 10. So we can start with Scroll stealing their artifacts, and then I can still both Swords and Leyline Binding. So probably Swords the Questing Beasts. Opponent has a response. Just getting a tap land. Get a Ring Bearer, and then this is now legendary with Anthem as well. Hit you for 8, and then still have Binding available. And now with the Serah on our side, it's easier to redeploy Tom as well. Yasharn prevents sacrifices. That's okay. Don't have to binding it. Alright, stun both of the opponent's creatures, get in for 8, play Tom, and looks like our opponent has seen enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tifa, a deck that can present lethal very quickly. We do luckily have some interaction with the Witch's Vanity, and then the Acroan War could also maybe interfere. So as far as hands go, this is maybe keepable. So we can get a tri-land. Ideally one with black and white in it. So black, white, green is probably my only option. Play the Vanity. And then next turn we can start with Fable. Or maybe Enchantress's Presence if we think we have the time to set it up. Opponent cultivates, so next turn they can replay Tifa. Alright, we drew a land, so now I can maybe play the Presence first. Although getting the Shaman token going is also tempting here. Maybe I still go Fable first. Card advantage is not as relevant as just getting on the board and making sure we don't get run over. Ramping out the Kami War could be part of that plan. Because their opponent does have a green mana available now. So it's possible they can protect Tifa. And then, what do we discard? Conqueror's Death isn't doing much for me at the moment. And then, maybe Enchantress's Presence is too slow. We need some more action right now. Okay, so let me start by attacking. So I could play Tom, or I can try the Acroan War, stealing Tifa, opponent protects it, and then we probably die next turn. Although playing Tom is not gonna really make a huge difference either. So, yeah, if they have the right cards in hand, we're probably dead. Yeah, there's a Tyvar's stand. So let's see. Do you have Pump Spell into Fetch Land? For now, Ride. And a Scale Up, so if they have a Fetch Land, we're super dead. And that's Evolving Wilds, so that's game over. GG's. So yeah, not much we could have done. Next turn with the Shaman, we could have cast the Kami War for more interaction. But they just had everything they needed. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Clive, Mono Red, Devotion. Our hand has multiple ramp cards, Terra to find more enchantments. So we'll try it. Start with a Triome. Next turn we can maybe explore first. And then I can still fetch a tapped land. Opponent with a Scoundrel making a treasure. Take one. Definitely want to get a blue source. And we can make it a tri-land here. Okay, so we've got a couple options. Might want to get the saga going, just so we can set up Tom. And then we can still play Terra. And we've got options. Kami War still requires a land. Could play Restoration, get a Plains. Although I can play there and back again next turn regardless. So I think we go for Kami War. Our opponent needs to build up their devotion. Needlehead will punish us for drawing. And Shadow Spear. Okay, so I could play the Kami War already. Could also double spell Signet and then there and back again. And then maybe next turn play Tom. Or I could play Tom now, although it's not going to have Hexproof and Indestructible yet. But then next turn we get to go to the final chapter and trigger Tom's ability. So that might be worth it. Problem is, a 4/4 still potentially within range of the opponent's interaction. So maybe I should wait one more turn and then play there and back again. Basic mountain should be fine. I guess we'll target the Needlehead so I can attack for 4. Alright, so next turn we get to search up a mountain. As our opponent keeps on ramping with Key to the Archive. So that could be a fine target for the Kami War. Although I'm also tempted to get Tom in play now. And then, yeah, I can just get a tapped tri-land. Play Tom and pass. Can also transform Terra if we'd like. Is this one legendary? It's not. Let's go with Tom. We've waited long enough. Terra can attack. And then if they want to play Clive next turn, that's fine by me. Alright, opponent's gonna Doomblade Terra. Luckily, Tom dodges their removal spell. So that's what they found of Key to the Archive. And now more artifact ramp with Firemind Vessel. So we get our dragon token, Tom triggers. Find an Elspeth's Nightmare, and our opponent immediately concedes. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing blue-white artifacts. Hand's got potential with a turn 1 Utopia Sprawl. Ideally enchant a basic, so they can mess it up with non-basic land hate. So we can get a forest. And then name blue perhaps. Turn 2 summon. And then turn 3 we could already play Tom. With the summon about to get to chapter 3, so it's kind of the perfect curve here. Even have a scroll to steal an artifact. Alright, really hoping our opponent can't remove Tom here. Do I attack for 3? Sure. Don't really want to trade, but don't expect them to. So I guess the fact that they didn't trade makes it more likely that they have removal for Tom. Take 1. Speed up to 2. And yeah, just a Solemn, so we get to untap, get to chapter 3, get another free saga, and we're off to the races. So hopefully we hit something big. And Elder Dragon War certainly counts. Wipe your board. Can keep ramping with Restoration, and then still play Sterling Grove out. Play Sterling Grove, and then can play maybe a Bloodstained Mire, which can always fetch a swamp or a tri-land. And now our enchantments have Shroud, but I can also use Sterling Grove to tutor up another powerful enchantment. Opponent does get speed up to 3 here, which was a downside of attacking. Although we can maybe steal their commander if they run it out. Okay, which enchanter has to target Sterling Grove, and then we can just sacrifice it in response. And what do we want to get? Something we can cast ideally. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Jhoira would count. Could Wake the Trolls, which would be fun, or maybe a Kami War. Certainly have options. Jhoira seems good here. Do I want to discard anything? Maybe get back a Sterling Grove? Sure. And then I'm fine with my hand. Play Jhoira. Tom, in the meantime, also has Hexproof and Indestructible. And then next turn I get to tap all their stuff down, so we're attacking for at least 13. Get another free saga from these going to chapter 3. So yeah, could not have had a much better draw this game. And our opponent agrees. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Choco, Bant, Birds. We've got 2 powerful mana elves. And yeah, some other ramp cards, at least 1 saga. Clifftop enters untapped, so a functional hand. Question now is Weaver versus Bloomtender. Bloomtender might have the highest upside once we play Revival. And I guess we cannot quite play it since we're missing black, but Cultivate can fix that. Could also Sanctum Weaver plus Goldberry, which is our opponent keeping up a counter spell, maybe? Yeah, I guess we'll double spell here. And if Goldberry resolves, I can Cultivate alongside it, so maybe that's even better. Okay, so I want to get Swamp and probably Island in hand. So we have double blue as well. Opponent had an Ambrosia end of turn. That's fine. So next turn I can play Tom and immediately play another 4-drop or 5-drop depending on the mana. But this may not resolve. Any alternatives? Just play the Revival. Bloomtender makes 4 mana, so then I can still play Tom alongside it. Yeah, I guess we'll bait out with Revival first. If they counter, I still play Sanctum Weaver. So they had the Wash Away, as it turns out. Okay, not a disaster. We have more sagas in hand. And then Goldberry probably not doing much. So our opponent can play Choco, and they would get a decent attack with Ambrosia. But then they're tapped out. I can conquer, take care of Choco after playing Tom. So opponent's gonna keep up interaction instead. Alright, Eidolon, also kind of a must counter here. So yeah, Tom's never resolving if I try. Eidolon maybe resolves. Then Bloom Tender makes 2 mana, blue and a green. Sanctum Weaver has 2 enchantments, so I guess we'll start here. That resolves. So I could still go for Tom now. And then next turn I can likely cast it again if it does get countered. Okay. Opponent had a Mind Sensor, so that punishes fetch lands as well. So with the Goldberry, I can move a lore counter onto it and then move it back. So I can sort of funnel lore counters from one saga onto another one. So we can maybe get to chapter 3 a little bit faster. They had a Boseiju to maybe blow up an enchantment as well. And it's time for Choco, leaving up blue-white mana. So they're hoping to hit a couple of lanes. Alright, no lanes. So I get to block. And if they can't landfall at instant speed, we get to eat Ambrosia for free. Now on tap. And yeah, we've got a ton of mana now between Sanctum Weaver and Bloom Tender. So we can conquer death. Try and deal with Choco. Draw a card of Eidolon. And we're sort of going off. Summon Titan. No real need to deal with even Mind Sensor just yet. But yeah, our opponent has seen enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kotis, so a Sultai Voltron deck. So ideally we keep a hand that has some removal that can exile the opponent's commander to get around indestructible. This hand's not terrible. If Sanctum Weaver lives, turn 3 Revival, turn 4 Tom, and then get to chapter 3. If they have removal for Sanctum Weaver, this hand kind of falls apart. And then we still need to get lucky that they don't remove Tom and that we hit another powerful saga. But I think it's got enough potential. But also wouldn't be opposed to mulliganing to look for more specific interaction. But our opponent being on a Voltron deck also means they're less likely to have a lot of interaction. So we both kind of get to do our thing. Hopefully our thing is more powerful than the opponent's. And get a tri-land, including blue. So maybe blue, green, red. I guess the Chapel still enters tapped. But we can address that pretty easily by fetching a swamp, for instance. Alright, so we get to play our saga. Opponent didn't have any ramp, so no turn 3 Kotis. If they remove the Weaver now, I guess they can delay Tom by a turn, and then we kind of missed the window to get to chapter 3. Just Birds of Paradise. Possible they're keeping up Wash Away for a blue mana. So we'll grow the tokens. Yeah, Wash Away is somewhat likely here. Could play around it by just playing a Starfield. And then, let's see, This triggers at the beginning of my upkeep. I do have to select the targets. And this happens in the main phase, so yeah, I'm not going to be able to get back my enchantment. So maybe I just try Tom anyway. Although, let's see, if I play Dryad... Yeah, this only makes color of 1 mana, so there's no world where we play Dryad and Tom. But yeah, I guess it's not a disaster if they counter Tom. Because then, with Dryads and Sanctum Weaver, it's not going to take me long to redeploy. Alright, that actually resolved. Color me surprised. So does our opponent tap out for Kotis, or maybe they have a sweeper here. Just Kotis, keep up a mana from birds. Could be a protection spell for their commander. But yeah, let's see what we find of Tom's ability. Zeus's Many Journeys, probably one of the worst sagas we could have hit. But there's still a Starfield to maybe get back a revival and take it from there. So, can start by attacking. They can eat a token with Kotis, so maybe that's not worth it. They might have a pump spell for Kotis as well. Alright, that happens. And then, let's see here, I can probably go Dryad. Might be overextending into a board wipe like Damnation. Also have an extra land from Azusa's Many Journeys. So then I have 1, 2, 3 enchantments in play. So not quite enough to also play Bloom Tender, but I do want to get the Starfield online. Alright, let's see what our opponent can come up with here, since they kept a somewhat slow hand, so they must have good ways to either interact or enhance Kotis. Binding goes for the Starfield. I can end of turn fetch to Surveil by getting the Portico. And maybe find something more exciting. Swords to Plowshares, good answer to Kotis, although it does feel like her opponent's got a protection spell in hand since they've kept the birds available. So, yeah, could be still worth keeping. If our opponent does tap out, we can answer Kotis, but don't have particularly high hopes. So now, no real point in attacking unless we attack all out, which could be reasonable. Opponent's at 13 after all. They can maybe block a 2-2, still take 10 damage. And then next turn we've got another saga going to the final chapter. Okay, opponent willing to maybe throw away the birds. So now the coast is clear for swords. I think I still let them untap first. Maybe they've got some mutate creature they want to put on Kotis, and then we can still end up exiling it. They have less mana to cast something proactive and keep up a protection spell. And my fear is that if I swords Kotis and they do have a sweeper in hand, I didn't really make a ton of progress. Audacity step 1. Anything else? Primal Might, opponent's completely tapped out. So yeah, we got rewarded for our patience here, unless they've got a Pact of Negation left. Alright, so we got to see this 5-color saga deck in action. And yeah, Tom's pretty fun, especially if it survives and you get lucky with the first saga you reveal, if it's one of the more expensive ones. But yeah, it's still a good excuse to play with maybe some underplayed enchantments and experiment with all the sagas from Final Fantasy as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.